Travelers Rest, South Carolina. I'm here visiting my grandparents and celebrating my grandfather's 80th birthday. Oh, stop. We have a couple family members here. It's my dad, Ken, again. You saw him in the last video. This is Janetti. There's the birthday boy. This is his brother, Rich, and Carol, his wife, and my Uncle Steve, and my lovely filmmaker, who's Mo. So I have a quick video for you all to watch. So you all should know what that date was. Does anybody know where some people were alive during Pearl Harbor? Janetti, were you alive during Pearl Harbor?
What year was that?
41.
No.
No? Grandpa, I know you were. Where were you during Pearl Harbor?
Listen to the radio.
Listening to the radio.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I was born the day after Pearl Harbor.
You were. Uncle
That was
Rich?
a day of infamy, too.
I don't remember, but I was born. I was alive then.
Yeah. You don't remember where you were during Pearl Harbor?
Where were we living then?
Glenside.
Right?
So, my thesis statement is Franklin Roosevelt's speech, known as a date that will live in infamy speech, is one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. This speech is also known as the Pearl Harbor speech. So first I'm going to talk to you a little bit about just some basic information on who he was. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR, was born on January 30th in 1882 in New York. He had a wife, Eleanor, and he was also diagnosed with polio in 1921, making him 39 years old. That made him only, 39, and he was in a wheelchair pretty much for the rest of his life. He was the 32nd president of the United States. He was elected in 1932, and he was the only president that had 4 years. He served 4 terms. He led the world through
He was elected to 4 terms.
He was elected
He
for
died-
4 terms.
He died during his 4 terms.
He led this world, and he led the United States through the Great Depression, and he led them into World War II. He had a program of the New Deal, which was a series of programs, and he helped them get through this trauma of the Great Depression. It's recognized as relief, recovery, and reform. He helped them get through this tough time. He helped reform the United States because they really suffered. A lot of workers had no jobs. There was a lot of hunger. There was a lot of trauma and depression and sadness, and he needed to help this country. The goals in his speech was to declare war. Congress is the one that makes the decision to declare war, but Roosevelt was the one to say, he needed to talk to them and say, I need to declare war. To the American public, he wanted to rally the support of this war. Pearl Harbor was no day that should be ever forgotten. It was horrible for people. Many Americans died, and it was not a good time for the world. So he knew that this needed to happen. He needed to declare this war. To appease this public, he gave a brief, uncomplicated appeal so as to not overwhelm this audience. It was 7 minutes. It wasn't too long. It was pretty brief. And he gave this to have dramatic effect. He used a term called kairos, which is a term from over 2,000 years ago, speaking in a timely manner. This gave powerful and rhetorically importance. So this speech was very powerful and gave a lot of importance, and that's why he used such a brief speech. Where did he give this speech? He gave it in front of Congress, a joint session in Washington, D.C., but he also gave it over the radio. This speech had the largest audience in U.S. history of the radio. 81% of American homes were tuned in listening to him speak. On December 8th, 1941, at 12:30 p.m., he delivered this speech. It was one day after Pearl Harbor had happened, and this indicated that he was ready to face this issue. He needed to face this issue. This indicated also the importance of this traumatic event to the people and also to him. Some ideas behind the speech. He used 3 techniques. He used simple, open language. This created this language to be easy to understand. He gave off a friendly vibe. He used the word fellow to address his vice president, just to make the audience feel a little bit at ease through this hard time. He incorporated concrete examples and explanations. His text organization was small summaries of his statements. He really needed to make this audience feel like he was in control, to make him feel that they had nothing to worry about. He was going to handle this. The tone of the speech was determined realism. The first draft change, that was the first line of the speech. He changed world history to infamy. So instead of saying a date that will live in world history, he used a date that will live in infamy, just to add dramatic effect. He also used day versus date. This caused some conflict. A lot of people think that it is a day that will live in infamy. It's not a day, it's a date. Roosevelt wanted to make sure that people remembered this date. It's not just a day. Pearl Harbor was not just a day. People needed to realize that this was a date. This needed to be embedded in their minds so that they would never ever forget this date. He used word forms of Japanese. He used the Japanese Empire. He used Japanese, Japan. He used the Japanese government. So not as to use the same word every single time. It's hard to say Japanese people, Japanese this, Japanese that. So he switched it up a little bit, saying the Japanese Empire, the Japanese government. The reaction towards the speech, the Senate response was a unanimous vote supporting this war. There was one person who turned the war down, so that meant that obviously they won, that this war was going to happen. 33 minutes after this speech happened, this war was declared. The American politics, this had a long-lasting and immediate impact on the world and on American politics. This was an overwhelmingly positive reflection on this because they knew that this had to be done. So in conclusion, what is your opinion of Franklin Roosevelt? Anyone? Anyone? What is your opinion? Did you support the war? What do you think? Dad, you have an opinion for everything.
He's not the same guy that did the Gettysburg Address, right?
No. No opinions of Roosevelt?
Roosevelt. Well, He was a strong leader at a time when you needed a strong leader.
That's very good, and that's a very good point.
I looked this up before.
Sure you did. So in conclusion, this man was a wonderful man. He's shaped this country, and he helped make this time just a little bit easier for these people. Millions of people died, and it was a very traumatic event for these people, and he needed to make sure that these people knew that they were under control, that they were taken care of. Thank you all for listening to my speech. I really appreciate it. You were wonderful audience members.
Whoever's a good member of your